Excellent. So let's dive into the topic at hand on home energy rebates and the programs. There's a great deal of money that's flowing. I think it's $9 billion to the states, 3 point something billion of which will be directed towards rebates and administering and making the rebates work functionally. This is serious money, and it will be money that's available in the states. I think what we've got is a number of presenters who are experts in the field, tremendous knowledge that they're bringing to this conversation, but also some innovative ideas about. So one of the things we're very excited about is this idea of housing counselors being navigators, and we're trying to kick around what the best term is, but the idea is that what happens is that there are quite a few programs that are not necessarily easily navigated by consumers, so that there are tax rebates, there's some state programs that will look more like grants. How do you weave them all together? And those critical issues are difficult to manage. And then how do you deal with contractors? And this might be a perfect role for housing counselors for your existing clients, but also new clients. The key thing is that this is an eligible activity for the states to pay for. It's not required by them, so the question is how to get to them early to convince them. But we'll talk at some length about this in a few moments. And what we're trying to think of is what's the best name for this. So we're talking, it's been suggested, Home Energy Navigators or Home Energy Advisors. So we should try to figure out if people have some thoughts about which one's preferable for them and which ones they think work best for their clients. But so with that note, we have Olivia Wine from the National Consumer Law Center, and the National Consumer Law Center, they're regulars on our calls, as you well know, have been a tremendous resource for housing counseling, and now they're doing, and typically it's been around housing and loss mitigation and consumer issues. This is really about the energy side of things, so really glad they're getting involved here. And then Stacy Tutt from the National Housing Law Project. Stacy's been on before. She has been a leading voice in the Homeowners Assistance Fund that has really helped make the program work much better. We're very glad that she's involved in this as well. And then we also have Susan Kottner, who's a veteran housing counselor, director and manager at Affordable House at AHP Housing Center and the Affordable Housing Partnership and the Albany Community Land Trust. Susan is a trusted and experienced voice in this field, and they've been working these kind of programs for a while now. So this will be an experienced voice speaking about what how these programs work best. So with that quick note, I'm going to hand it over to Olivia, and then well, each of you should just pass it on to the next person.
Thank you, Bruce. And as Bruce mentioned, I'm a senior attorney with the National Consumer Law Center. I work out of NCLC's DC office, and my focus is on energy, water, and telecom programs and policies. And I just wanted to thank you for inviting me to talk about the IRA Home Energy Rebate Programs. IRA is Inflation Reduction Act. And I wanted to note off the top that Stacy Tutt and I have collaborated to create a IRA Home Energy Rebate State Program Design resource for advocates. And so a lot of our presentation today is from that resource and that set of recommendations. And there'll be a picture of it in Stacy's slide deck. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit about NCLC. I'm not going to read it to you, but we've been around for 55 years, and we do focus on low-income households and helping them to retain wealth and advance economic fairness. Next slide. A little bit of a roadmap as to where I'm going to go in my few slides. I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the IRA rebate programs. There are two. General concepts in the NCLC National Housing Law Project set of recommendations, and then start in with a few of the recommendations, and Stacy will take it home. Okay, next slide, please. So in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed into law back in August, there were 8.8 billion for the two rebate programs we're about to talk about. And this is all under that umbrella of, 400 billion for clean energy projects. So this is just to say, in terms of where consumers will be coming from and what consumers will be hearing, there are a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of different funding streams coming into the states. This is why having somebody who understands where these rebate programs fit within a state's suite of programs is critical for ensuring that households are able to sort of maximize the amount of these investment dollars. Because otherwise, without a navigator or an advisor, chances are the household will, maybe hear about one program or maybe two, may not know how to sequence or stack, the programs together. It gets complicated really quickly for consumers. The DOE, Department of Energy, is estimating that these rebates are going to save households up to $1 billion annually on their energy bills. And it will support about over 50,000 US jobs. These rebates are available through September 30th, 2031, or until a state runs out of its funds. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some key timelines to keep in mind with these two energy rebate programs. States need to notify the Department of Energy if they're intending to decline their funds for these two rebate programs by August 16th this year. So it's coming up. So we will know if any states decide not to take the money. And states should be submitting their program plans to the Department of Energy by January 31st, 2025. So right now, we have 20 states that have applied. New York State is the first state that's actually launched their rebate program. So they've gotten this off the ground. I'd say 7 applications have been approved, and those states are in the process of getting to the point of implementing. And then the remainder states, the 13 states, have submitted applications but are awaiting DOE's approval. So it is a multi-step process, and this is where there is the opportunity to get in front of your state energy office, make the pitch for your role as a navigator, and that being a key component in the design of the state rebate plans. States have to submit an implementation blueprint to the Department of Energy after they hear that they've gotten their award. So before they can even launch their program, they need to tell the Department of Energy, explain the community benefits plan, their education and outreach strategy, their consumer protection plan, their data access plan for the efficiency rebates, the privacy and security risk assessments for their systems, and their market transformation plan. So there's still a lot of detail that is going to be provided to the Department of Energy prior to launch. And the Department of Energy will be providing feedback and approval to move forward. The state energy offices are the entities within the state that are authorized, that will be the program implementers for these two federal rebate programs. There's an association called NASEO, the National Association of State Energy Officials, NASEO.org. If you go to their website and look up their members, that's how you find the state energy office in your state. And it's important to get to know that office. And I do not be surprised if there may be a lag time in response. Those offices have been staffing up, and in a lot of states, they're actually quite small, just a handful of people, and they're drinking through a fire hose. Next slide, please. The other thing to keep in mind about the two rebate programs is that the Department of Energy has provided sort of, using the statutory language, a uniform definition of low and moderate income households. And these are quite generous if compared to other anti-poverty programs, but I'm not, be aware that they may not sync up with the programs that you're familiar with. So low income is defined as at or below 80% area median income. Moderate income is between 80% AMI and 150% area median income. And then there's definitions for low income multifamily buildings and moderate income multifamily buildings. And these definitions apply to the occupied units at the time of application to be in the program. Next slide. So the Department of Energy has prepared sort of very detailed guidance on the two rebate programs. And all the way at the back of the guidance document, there's an appendix A, which has the allocations per state. So this is the award amounts. If the state is going to move forward, this is how much they will get for the home efficiency. That's the first rebate program we'll talk about, rebate program. And you'll notice in some of these columns that they're providing the maximum amount for program administration. And that's sort of the bucket where I think you're going to make the case for some of these funds should go to fund navigators. It's a critical part of the consumer outreach and education piece, and ensuring folks, especially if you're targeting low and moderate income households, will have, fair access to these programs. Now, you'll notice as you further along in these columns, there's a minimum allocation for low income households by law. Each of the states that decides to participate in these programs will have to set aside a set amount of dollars just for low income households and low income multifamily households. So the Department of Energy provided the minimum allocation. States can go higher. I mean, in theory, a state could just direct, the vast amount of its grant IRA rebate dollars towards low and moderate income households. And then that final column is sort of the areas, the amount of funds that you can sort of play with, in terms of your targeting. Are you going to put that more of those dollars into low income, multifamily, moderate income, so forth. Next slide, please. And then this is, again, in that appendix at the end of the Department of Energy guidance, they do also break out the rebate dollars for the appliance rebates. And though you may have heard of the appliance rebates more in the news, HEAR, Home Energy Appliance Rebates Program versus Home Efficiency Rebates Program. They have multiple names because the statute called them different things as well, but Department of Energy has tried to simplify the acronyms. And then the other thing to keep in mind with the appliance rebates is 100% of the rebates are directed to low and moderate income households under the law. The energy efficiency rebates, that HER rebate program that was in that prior slide, they have minimum allocations for low-income households and low-income multifamily, but it's technically a state could make it available to all residential in the state. States have great flexibility in their eligibility criteria, sort of within those larger frames. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, a little bit more about her, also called homes in the statute. And this is the Energy Efficiency Rebate Program. The amount of dollars that a household will be eligible for is determined more by the amount of savings, the energy savings versus the specific types of measures. So it is whatever package of savings that can get you enough to hit the maximum rebate amount. So, and there are two ways that a state can design, three ways. Their energy efficiency rebate program, they could use measured savings. Those are actual savings that the household is seeing. They could use modeled savings, or they could use some combination of both. And then the other thing to keep in mind with the efficiency rebate program is that in the statute creating this rebate program, states have the flexibility to direct to increase the maximum rebate amounts for low-income households. So in theory, a state could decide to cover 100% of project costs for low-income households. So they would just need to apply to the Department of Energy to expand the rebate amounts for low-income households, and Department of Energy would need to approve that request. But that mechanism exists in the statute to increase that rebate amount for low-income households. Next slide. The appliance rebate program, which is just for low and moderate income households, using that definition that I had talked about earlier, covers very specific measures. And the guidance goes into detail for each measure, but essentially electric heat pumps, electric water heaters, heat pump water heaters, the electric stoves, cooktops, ranges, clothes dryers. It includes work to upgrade the electric panel, the breaker box work. It includes funds for the wiring and insulation. Low-income households can get up to this maximum amount, which is listed in this bulleted list, and moderate income households are eligible for up to 50% of the cost. Now, again, states have great flexibility in sort of deciding which of these measures will be covered in their appliance rebate program. So this is sort of the most expansive list, but what you may see in your state is a pared down list. Next slide, please. Here are some key features to keep in mind about the two rebate programs. There's a great emphasis on making it easier for the household to see that rebate benefit immediately. So that sort of point of sale type of characteristic, either, the contractor is going to pass through that rebate amount and it's going to look like a discount off of the work. Or if the state chooses to have retailers involved, like big box stores, it would be sort of point of sale at time of purchase, a discount off that purchase price for that appliance. And that is an option for the states. There is an incentive for contractors to work in, and disadvantaged communities will be defined by each state in their application. So there's sort of an extra bonus for contractors to do this work in those areas of $200 for each of the rebate programs. There are some prohibitions on combining grant dollars with these rebate dollars for the exact same measure, but you can, combine different funding streams within a project as long as, the two federal grants are not financing the same measure work. And Stacy will have a slide, a nice slide on what can be mixed and matched. Solar is not included in these two rebate programs. That is a different incentive operating through a different agency. IRA rebates are not treated as income, which is helpful for low-income households. And as I had mentioned throughout, states are going to have a lot of flexibility in the design of their two rebate programs. And this is really important because I think low-income advocates or consumer advocates, housing advocates have an opportunity to go make their case in front of the state energy office about, how they should be designing their programs to be responsive to the community's needs, particularly for low-income households, low-income multifamily households, housing in disadvantaged communities, how you define disadvantaged communities in the state, how you design the application process. All of these things are covered in the program design that the states will be providing to the Department of Energy. So community input is critical for an informed design. Next slide, please. That was my first point about stakeholder engagement being critical. The program design is going to be iterative. As I noted, the rebate dollars are available until September 30th, 2031. And states are these programs are supposed to be sending out surveys. They're short to every household that receives these rebate incentives, sort of asking about how their experience was. There's supposed to be a complaint process set up. So there's going to be data as to how this program is working and opportunities to update the consumer protections. So there will be opportunities to sort of take the information, especially the frontline groups in the field, working with consumers, hearing where the friction points are to sort of feed that back into the state energy office plan and work towards improvements. And again, funding program navigators is going to be critical. These programs are going to be complicated in terms of where they fit for a particular household in the suite of things that maybe the household is eligible for. For example, the long-standing Department of Energy low-income weatherization program. And maybe it may be that the house has some health and safety issues that need to be addressed first before it makes sense to come in and with these program dollars and make these clean energy improvements to the home. So sort of having somebody, an energy advisor who's aware of what is going on, what is available in the state, what the process is for applying, and can be that sort of bundler of those various services for that household, and sort of providing that advice as to how that particular household can get the most out of this sort of once in a lifetime opportunity with these great rebate dollars flowing. Next slide. Protecting consumers from fraud, confusion, their personal data is absolutely critical. We like to elevate this at the program design level, so to keep it top of mind as the states are designing how these programs are working. Our organization, NCLC, works with legal services. We're familiar with the ways that the wheels can fall off the bus, so to speak. The solar scams, for example, with the aggressive door-to-door marketing and folks that are not acting in the best interest of the consumer, providing the wrong information, or encouraging consumers to, sign up for way more measures than they actually need or can use if financing is involved. And so it is really important, again, to have the energy advisor, the navigator type of person, the independent expert who has the consumer's interest in mind to help the consumer sort of navigate through the different sales pitches they've heard, especially if they've been approached by some aggressive marketers who may not have that consumer's interest in mind. Next slide, please. Another recommendation that we have for states is to create an advisory group, sort of that cluster of frontline organizations that are helping consumers navigate these spaces and that are seeing where the friction points are, that can sort of engage with the state energy office early before a problem starts to escalate. If you're noticing sort of, a common fact pattern, or the application seems to have this friction point, a lot of people seem to be hitting a buzzsaw and deciding not to move forward, and if you've got recommendations, these are opportunities to sort of bring things to the attention of the program administrator early before things get out of hand. So we think that this is just very smart for the best sort of design, the strongest consumer protections. It's a trusted group of people that are on the front lines that are very familiar with how these programs are rolling out. And that is what we consider a best practice. Next slide, please. Some additional recommendations. I had mentioned before, increasing the set-asides for low incomes. That appendix that I showed you, those charts, the state dollar breakouts with the minimum allocations for low income, it's an opportunity to send more of those dollars to low income households, low and moderate income households. Again, I had mentioned with the Home Efficiency Rebate Program, the statute does allow up to 100% of low-income project costs to be covered by that rebate program. So, advocates can press harder there, press the state for increasing that rebate amount for low-income households, especially since they don't tend to have the savings, that upfront cash to finance this stuff. Categorical eligibility is something that the Department of Energy is trying to sort of help jumpstart in the states, and they've created a 4-page list of programs that they've already gone through and said, these participation in any one of these programs on these 4 pages would make you automatically eligible for these Department of Energy rebates. So leaning into that list, self-certification of eligibility is permitted, but will have to be verified 100% for everybody who goes in through like a self-certification. If you're trying to speed up the beginning part of the application and move it along with self-certification, you will have to go back and verify everybody, everybody's eligibility. Next slide. We do recommend, we think most states will probably use modeled savings, sort of software that sort of helps them guess, program implementers figure out how much in savings you should be seeing if you do a certain package of measures. We think, and modeled savings is a newer sort of actual measurement of the savings type of design. And since it's a newer model, we think that it's a great opportunity to pilot it. States can have hybrid programs, modeled and measured. If they're not even thinking of looking at measured savings, it might be a time to make that case, like make that pitch, pilot it. The community benefits plan is a key component that states will have to turn into the Department of Energy So this is where states are required to have that meaningful participation in the plan development and the community engagement. And they need to show how disadvantaged communities are being are benefiting from this, their program design. So again, this is a great sort of keep your eye on that component of the plan. That could be a great way to shape the aspects of the design that will mean a lot to the low-income households. Next slide. Next slide, please. And my contact information will be at the end of Stacy's slide as well. But please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And I do encourage folks to check out the NCLC NHLP advocates resource with our recommendations for advocates wanting to engage in that development of the state plan for the 2 rebate programs. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it to Stacy now.
Thank you, Olivia. And so I'm actually going to be just continuing on in some of the recommendations that Olivia was making, but focused a little bit more on the consumer and tenant protections that could be included in these plans. But before getting to that, I do just want to briefly introduce myself to all of you. I know you've already heard a little bit about my background, but I am a senior staff attorney at the National Housing Law Project. And our mission at the National Housing Law Project is to advance housing justice for poor people and communities. We achieve this by strengthening and enforcing the rights of tenants and low-income homeowners, increasing housing opportunities for underserved communities, and preserving and expanding the nation's supply of safe and affordable homes. My role at the National Housing Law Project for the last few years has really been focused on the Homeowner Assistance Fund and its implementation across the country. And I mention this only because that work has really helped inform some of our recommendations that we have made with the IRA program and with the Department of Energy. Because much like how HAF operated, in which there was a large federal allocation that was made, under the HAF program, Treasury states of how they should do their programs. Under the IRA program, we have the Department of Energy who has done that as well, and they've issued their own guidance to the states. And I'm actually going to put a link in the chat for everyone on that, their own guidance on what could be included in those state plans, and some recommendations of what states should include in those plans. But now we're at that stage, like we saw in HAF, where the states are working to develop those plans, come up with what should be included in there. That'll be the initial stage. And then as Olivia described, they're going to get into their community benefits plans. They're going to have hopefully funding opportunities for housing counselings to provide navigation roles. And so there'll be continuing opportunities not only to influence the plan, but the subsequent plans that are out there. And what we've seen in HAF that we're hoping to replicate in the IRA is that in some of those plans, then they can advance and improve circumstances in general for homeowners, not necessarily just under those plans. And we think the IRA has that potential as well in order to help our households get access to energy efficient improvements, while also setting an industry standard on the consumer and tenant protections that should be included with those benefits that are being received under the IRA. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more and get into some of the specifics of what are some of those consumer and tenant protections we could be advocating for throughout all of the different plan development stages. So if we can go to the next slide. The first thing we're going to talk about is tenant protections. Now, I know we had a great question in our Q&A from Phyllis asking the question of, is it the tenant or landlord who qualifies for this program? So in this program, it is going to come up in the design, and in some instances, the tenant may be able to apply for the benefit in order to have it just within their unit. It could also be landlords who are doing that for multifamily properties and looking to do energy efficient improvements throughout the complex. Now, in those situations, the tenant will have to get the landlord's permission to go forward, at least based on what the guidance and the proposals are that we have seen. And then for the landlord would be able to qualify on the basis of the income of the tenants and the programs as well. So this is why we think it's very important to be thinking about how do we protect tenants in that situation when these improvements are taking place, and in particular from displacement afterwards. So if we go on to the next slide, we have gone ahead and made some suggestions here on protections that should be in place within any of the plans and really tied to the benefits that are received. And this actually coincides with the recommendations that were put out by the Department of Energy whenever they gave this program guidance. They did want the states to ensure that they protect tenants from rent increases and displacement. So they want to ensure that a landlord can't come in, make improvements, and then try to get rid of the tenants and who help them qualify for those rebates or programs, depending on their qualifications for those programs. We also want to ensure that if they're accepting those benefits, that the property owners receiving the IRA funds have to maintain and extend the affordability for those properties for a period of time and have that based upon the level of funding that they've received. In addition, we think that any tenants who are receiving or federally supported in low-income housing, we do not want the receipt of the IRA benefits to negatively impact their utility allowances or the benefits that they are already eligible for. And then last but not least, if any of these protections are put in place and tied to that financing, we do want to ensure that they can actually be enforced, that tenants are aware of these protections, and that the property owners adhere to those protections as written within the plans. So again, these are just some of the recommendations that we're making of what states should include in their plans, all of which does align with a lot of the guidance that was put out by the Department of Energy. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about in this is the consumer protections that we think should be included. Thank you for going to the next slide. And so with the consumer protections, we're going to go into some more details of what could be there. And I think it will actually help to answer a question that came up from Alan in this, because with the consumer protection plans, as you can see here on this slide, we actually took a lot of lessons from what we've seen in the solar industry. And from that, we did come up with some recommendations that the Department of Energy has also adopted and is recommending are included in the plans. So one of those things, in order to cut down on fraud that we've seen in the industry, in particular with contractors going door to door and soliciting households for these products, we wanted to ensure that there was actually out there for everyone a published qualified contractor list as a way to help households determine if the contractor that they're working for is actually approved and has been vetted by the programs. And when we say vetted by the programs, this is supposed to help ensure that such contractors have the appropriate licenses to be doing the work, certifications for this. It would also be monitoring of any complaints that have been made against those home improvement contractors. And this is something that should be kept up in real time. So if there is a contractor that is out there that is not performing, that they be removed quickly from the list, and that households are aware that that is a removed contractor, so they're aware of the potential concerns or issues in and around working with them. So that is one recommendation that's there, again, that came out of that. Though I would note, just Alan, on your question about that, since it came up from solar programs, do keep in mind the IRA does not cover solar, but a lot of times these products are tied together. There's different things that are done simultaneously. So we are hoping some of these protections will actually influence the industry as well and help address some of those concerns in that area. If, again, we can start having more transparency for our households and who are qualified contractors. We also want to ensure that there are strong contract provisions within this. Again, lessons learned from the solar industry. We want to ensure that our households have access to the court system, so not having mandatory arbitration clauses within the contracts. We want to ensure the holder in due course rule so that consumer protections are not lost if this financing is sold off to another, and that the household can still have those protections. We've also seen a lot of issues in and around the utilization of electronic signatures and electronic records. Again, a lot of this came from the solar industry and seeing what was happening there. So we had really emphasized the importance of making sure that the e-Sign Act is being followed, that there is appropriate vetting and determination of the usage of email addresses for those electronic signatures, that households are getting copies of their documentation that they're signing, that they have time to review before having to do so, and other such things that will, again, ensure and hopefully protect them in these circumstances. And one of the big things that we have recommended, because we have again seen this in this area, is that energy audits be required for the Home Efficiency Rebates program. Now, the reason we're making this recommendation is because we have found that sometimes households may be funneled into more expensive improvements, or even in some instances, absolutely unnecessary improvements that won't actually improve the energy efficiency of the homes. So what we wanted to do with this recommendation is, by having an energy audit, then a household could actually look at what improvements could be made and do more of a cost-benefit analysis of the ways to most maximize their energy savings, really get the benefits of the program. And so that is one thing that we do recommend being included in the consumer protection plans. So hopefully, again, this gives you a general idea of some of the protections that you could be advocating for within these programs. But I'm sure you're wondering now, and if we can go on to the next slide, where does housing counseling fit in? And where do we see this interacting with the Inflation Reduction Act? If we can go on to the next slide. So one of the things that we have recommended in our resource guide is navigators. Now, I do know we have something in the chat where we're trying to think about what terminologies we want to be using in here. So whether we're looking at navigators or advisors, and I think it would be great to think of some terminology we can all agree with in this. So let me explain what we're thinking of this role, and hopefully that will help you in thinking about what is a good terminology that we'd all feel confident in and going forward. But really, the role of a navigator in this situation is that they could help households braid and stack their rebate opportunities, and that this could hopefully be done with existing weatherization and utility ratepayer funded energy efficient improvements. Now, as many of you may know, there's a lot of different programs out there when we talk about those, and a lot of different eligibility criteria that is there, and different types of improvements that can be included in one versus another, and the list goes on. And that is a lot for our households to try to navigate. I personally work in this area a lot, and I find it hard to coordinate all of that and make sure I'm really understanding all of those differences. And then another thing is that sequencing matters. So what improvement is done when and how that is done is also an important part of this. And again, that's a lot for a household to be evaluating, and we really don't want them just relying on someone who solicited them for the program who may benefit from that. Instead, we would love to have advisors that are there who could really ensure that the households are getting the accurate information, that they know how to maximize those benefits that are out there and available to them, and that also helping to make sure the data is shared amongst all the different entities who may need it, right? So that's a lot to do if there's different eligibility, documentation requirements, things of that nature, that having an advisor there could really be essential in order to help those. Oh, I do like the energy program connectors. Sorry, I keep watching the chat and seeing all your interesting and exciting ideas on this topic. But if we can go on to the next slide, I did want to just show you some of that braiding and stacking and that guidelines for leveraging other funding sources with the home energy rebates. And so what this can show here is that there can be what can be braided together, which means using other federal grants to fund the distinct measures and doing things of that nature. So we've given you some examples here, also examples of the co-funding of a program, and then just more information on just some of the guidelines in these sources and what can and cannot be done. So as you can tell, again, there's a lot that's out there. You can see all the different with weatherization, LIHEAP, different loan funds that are there. And this is why we really do believe households need the information from advisors or program connectors. So then that way the household has the right information they need in order to make a decision on what's going to work best for them and in their household. So if we go on to the next slide, what I wanted to do is emphasize that I know this is a lot of work and I know it is a complex area. And so, yeah, I like the comment about the chart being helpful in making and building a pitch. And that's what I'm actually doing here to all of you is I'm actually pitching to you to go after that funding and to help households in this very complicated situation. And so, really wanting to have the low to moderate income consumers have these advisors or navigators or connectors to help guide them through the process. And the states can direct up to 20% of their grant to administration costs, and that includes marketing, education, and outreach activities. All can be crucial roles that are played by housing counselors in these programs. And then again, we've added into this slide so you can see that we strongly recommend that navigators should be independent from the contractors implementing these programs, right? We don't want to incentivize fraud or incentivize misrepresentation and misinformation in this. And so I do think it is important that they're there. And then also, I think as Pamela just kind of raised up here, is that there are going to be particular maybe vulnerable populations that are going to need this assistance in order to be able to connect with these programs, which is why we also include within here the recommendation of housing counseling to maybe help with community outreach and language access. You are already considered trusted partners out there in the communities. You have such a strong network. And given that many of these households may have struggles in connecting with these programs, we've seen it in the Homeowners Assistance Fund. Oftentimes, individuals who are in rural communities and other areas or have lack of access to technology may be particularly challenged in these areas. And so we do make that recommendation here and that this funding is available. And so these are just some ideas on the roles that housing counseling could play in this program. So on to the next slide here. I did want to talk about next steps. I've seen lots of people asking questions about what is the status of our plan. So here's the map. This shows you the states that have prepared applications, those who have submitted those, the gold orange color applications that have been approved. And we can see New York is the one state in which the rebates are available. So this is just to let you all know the status of it. If you actually click on the state, you're going to be able to see more details about what's going on with that state program. So if we go to the next slide, I have gone ahead and clicked through. This is just an example of going to Texas's website that's here. Oftentimes what you'll find listed on these websites as the programs are going through the development, there'll be opportunities to submit written comments. California has already gone through that stage. There may be opportunities to engage in listening sessions. You can also sign up and get emails for updates on what things are happening and when. Now, again, these are high level at where the plans are. There's going to again be more opportunities to continue to comment and engage even after a plan has been approved, because there is the implementation, and we've talked about all the other different the benefits plans, the consumer protection plans, all of that which you can have influence on in this program. Now, one thing I think is a question that came up is, I think it was a question for New Jersey is, are these available yet? It may have been another state. I don't know for certain, but I would say that no, New York is the only one who has launched launched. In fact, I don't know if you could read in that tiny print there, but Texas has actually put on their website a notice to prevent fraud. It appears that people are already being solicited in Texas for a program that hasn't launched yet. So they've also included on this website a warning that the program has not launched yet. And so there is not any program that's available. And so if that's what they're being told by anyone that's soliciting them for the programs, they want them to know that that is not the case in their state. And so if we go on to the next slide, what this shows you here is a resource we have now for you if you are engaging in those comments, the listening sessions, or providing feedback. We have put together a very detailed issues brief and guide. Within this guide, what we do is we list all of these recommendations that we've been making. We provide you with the guidance from the DOE that supports the opportunity to influence those provisions and the DOE's recommendations on that. Then we include our own recommendations and resources in which to support those recommendations. And we hope this will be helpful as you go to comment and engage in this process. And we'll provide you as a resource as you go forward in this. And then, as Olivia said, at the end of our slides here, which I think might be the next one here, it may be a little bit later. Let's see. We're going to be going on to our next partner in this discussion, who's already out there working in this field. But at the end of the slides, you will have our contact information. You are welcome to email me or reach out to me if you have additional questions and concerns. And we'll also be staying on at the end of this presentation to make sure we answer all those questions that are in the Q&A. So thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over now to Susan to talk about the amazing work they've been doing in New York, which I think is just a wonderful model for all of us to be looking at and considering as we go forward. Thanks, Susan.
Great, thank you. Susan Kottner, I'm with Affordable Housing Partnership. We've been a housing counseling agency for 25 years and really excited to be in this space as energy advisors in New York State. So next slide. It's kind of a relief to go after these two wonderful presenters because I'm ticking off in my head, oh yeah, we're doing that consumer protection. So I feel like New York State has done a great job of being very intentional about energy equity. And they've invested early in coordinating with nonprofit groups. A lot of cooperative extensions are involved. Energy advocacy groups. I think we're there's a couple of us here even on the call from housing organizations that are very engaged in this energy advising work. And our role really is to work with individuals, small businesses, affordable housing programs and developers to make sure that families are aware of our huge transition that we're taking on as a country to transition to clean energy and making sure that no one's left behind. That's really our job in working with underserved communities. So we're one of 12 regional hubs in New York State. So next slide, please. So I really do feel that housing counseling agencies have so much to bring to bear on this issue, and I really encourage you to get actively involved. Certainly it makes sense in terms of just a housing affordability concern, right? We want to make sure that people have affordable energy costs as well. You have something that everybody wants, and that is an existing trusted relationship with low-income home buyers and tenants, because those are the target groups that need navigation, need assistance in accessing these great energy programs. And so you bring a lot to the table just by virtue of your connections to the families you've been assisting. You've got great case management skills. We do. A lot of us are already managing home repair programs. That's one of the big stumbling blocks and barriers we've been discovering is that people need to get that roof replaced before they can install insulation in that attic, which is really the number one thing that you need to do if you're helping someone become energy efficient. is insulation and air sealing. But if the building envelope doesn't permit that work to be done, it's a deferred project. It's dead on arrival, if you will. And so we've got that skill set to bring those resources to bear or know where to get those funds and help braid the programs as was discussed earlier. So really nonprofits are really, critical to implementing. It's great to have these high level program ideas coming from the federal government. If we don't step in to help people access them, they're not gonna find out about them. And similarly, we are the best people to convey information back to the government about what's working and what's not working. And in fact, New York State built into their process of the energy hubs a way to identify the barriers and communicate that back to NYSERDA, our energy efficiency agency, NYSERDA, so they can improve their programming. And so they've really integrated that feedback loop into their program design. So next slide. So our mandate really is working with low and moderate income households. Again, as it's turning out, because of the way the program is set up, we're really primarily focused on energy efficiency work, which is, again, insulation and air sealing. Right now in New York State, for families that are on natural gas, there's not a lot of benefit for them to become fully electric, because believe it or not, they're gonna, one of the things that New York State cares about is making sure that low-income people don't have a much higher energy bill. And unfortunately, because gas is still so much more affordable than electricity here, we're not fully electrifying buildings, but we're helping low-income families access programs so that they can get electric ready. And in the meantime, they're saving energy because they've reduced their costs to heat their home because of insulation efforts. So it's still extremely, extremely helpful to the low-income families we're working with. So we're marketing the program, we're doing application assistance, and then really troubleshoot those stalled or deferred projects, things that you guys we're all experts at. We also do have some workforce development efforts. We want to, and again, this is New York State wants to make sure that with all the clean energy jobs that are becoming available, that everybody is aware of those and helps and where to help them gain access to those training programs and resources. So next. So one of the things that's working well for us that these features have already been described, keep the application process as simple as possible. There was discussion about how, if you're already eligible for HEAP, you're eligible for this program. And that's really the only documentation that you need. It is critical to have a pre-qualified list of contractors who are familiar with the program and they're trained in building science. Oftentimes, we're running across old jobs where somebody insulated that attic, but they didn't ventilate it. And now there's nothing but mold up in that attic, and it's causing a lot of health issues for the families. So again, working with trusted contractors is really critical to the success. Savings to investment ratio is that consumer protection that's working pretty well in New York State. New York State requires they get that home energy assessment. Once that assessment is completed, then the vetted contractor develops the proposed work scope. And the eligible items that NYSERDA will fund are the ones where the family will see a savings benefit based, given the investment that's being made in that home. So they can't overbuild a system. The system that's installed, if it's a new heating system or whatever, there has to be a cost benefit ratio to it. And so that's that double check that consumers are not being, overbilled for projects. The state pays contractors directly, so there's not a lot of back and forth with the homeowner, the low-income family. So that kind of happens behind the scene. We do have quality assurance reviews. And again, I think one of the program design features that makes all these programs work really well in New York State is the fact that New York State has invested in the hubs. the community-based organizations, of which I'm hoping you all will take on this kind of work to help make projects successful. So next. We do have, we always have our wish list. There's just the families that we work with are buying older homes, right? We're an old state. Everything here is, is in need of repair. There's just not enough money in this program to get that roof replaced, to address the mold, remove asbestos, and that kind of thing. So one of the things we'd love to see is an expanded opportunity, a coordinated approach, if you will, to get all this work done, again, for the health and safety of the family in the home. Right now, the program is incentivizing assistance to families. It's based on that family, right? So it's the family that qualifies, not the building. The best time to insulate a house, right, is when there's a gut rehab going on and you can fully insulate it. And, that next family will benefit from that energy efficiency work. But that's not the way it's set up. And so a lot of times the projects are very incomplete because this is an occupied home. It's difficult to get the work done. We would love it if we had all the state agencies that deal with housing and energy working collaboratively. And that's a tall order, right? As anybody knows, working with government and the different agency programs. But, it's on our wish list. There's a lot of changes going on with the programs, and so that's sometimes been difficult. There's a lot of messaging that we'd like to suggest be changed so that it's easier and to explain the program, and that would really help build more trust in the program. And then one of the big dilemmas we have in New York State is that most of our affordable housing stock is kind of naturally occurring stuff, right? It's in that 1 to 4 unit investor-owned rental property. And those tend to be the units that are, need a lot of assistance. They're occupied by extremely low-income families who are not in a good position to negotiate with their landlord to get work done. And so that is a huge challenge because most government programs hate giving investor owners cash to improve their property, without those tenant protections built in. So we gotta keep working proactively on that small rental housing program. So last slide, I think. Next. As you're advocating for these programs, you all know better than anybody how important the words that are used to advocate for and describe the programs mean what, to help people decide whether it's for them or not, right? So one of the issues that we've had in New York State is that, people say, oh, you're going to get free money. You're going to get $10,000 to do this work. Whereas in fact, hardly anyone gets the full array of measures that would enable them to access the full 10 grand or whatever the new dollar amount is given the federal IRA program. So there's a lot of wording around it's an incentive to get work done. It's not fully funding projects. So you'll want to just make sure that wording makes sense. Again, it's all about building trust with the families you're working with. Right now, the federal government loves to talk about low-income people and disadvantaged communities, and I hate those words because as a housing agency that is so committed to rebuilding communities and trying to get more investment in communities, the last thing that people want to do is invest money in a disadvantaged community, right? Everybody tells me they want to get out of the ghetto, and that's really pushing us backwards. So I'm hoping we can, in the chat, also figure out another word for, investing in, opportunity communities where there's this great potential for growth and where great families live. I hate the label. All right, moving on. One of the struggles we're finding is that not all of these programs really do help families save money. And that especially comes into play with the conversion to air source heat pumps, for example. I mentioned this already. Converting from a gas heating system to an air source heat pump may not save that family money on a monthly basis. And that's a real huge political issue right now in New York State. So how do we figure that out? Again, the label of low income you know, people might self-select out. So if you can figure out another way to market the programs when you're working with your state agencies to design the program, think about that. One of the issues that we've run into is that people may be income eligible, but their house is not a great fit for energy efficiency work. And so there needs to be language when you're marketing the program, designing the program, to make sure that, it's not perceived by folks that, hey, I'm eligible because I am eligible. It's really a building and a homeowner or a tenant eligibility program. And then finally, we do think that all these opportunities are a great way to broaden the discussion about climate. We've got a lot of climate deniers in New York State, and it's a little bit of a dance. And so we depending on who we're talking to, we might be talking about energy independence, or we may be talking about progressive climate change policies, so just being aware of who you're talking to, whether it's a rural community, which might be more interested in independence versus someone else who really cares about the future of our Earth. So anyway, so I think our contact information is on the next slide. So that's what I got to. So thank you, guys. I really hope you get into this space because we really need your help. It's really a great place for housing advisors to be.
Really excellent. Thank you, everybody. We're going to have questions in just a moment. I'll hand it over to Ellie at that point. But just a couple quick notes. One is we're very interested in combining solar into the conversation. And there are two issues here, one of which Stacy and Olivia touched on a little bit, which is the solar scams and people who are really selling a financial product that's being used to convince people that they should get solar when it might not be the right fit for them, or might not provide the savings that they promise. The other one is that there is a lot of investment that will be made in solar, and we want that to be part of this whole complex thing. So we will do webinars that are aimed at really the solar piece, and we'll need to figure out how to weave these together so that the stacking and braiding and all those kind of terms that this could fit in as well, because certainly in terms of the longer term, as Susan pointed out, as a longer term solution, solar is a big step forward, and for many people will be a cost reducer. But as in all these conversations, we needed to make it work for the consumer, and those are tricky issues that need to be navigated. But there'll be plenty more. We're going to talk about this, and we're really interested in people moving to get forward. So we'd love to hear when you're starting to get conversations with your state about this, about what's working and not working. And we might just do one session just on what the experience has been and what are the lessons learned around those kind of issues. So with that, let me step back and turn it over to Ellie.
Thanks, Bruce, and hi, everybody. I just wanted to follow up really quickly on something that Susan said about how the homeowner might be eligible, but the home itself might not be eligible. So many years ago, I actually engaged with Affordable Housing Partnership in their program to help with energy efficiency, and had an energy assessment done. And what I'll tell you is we could have gotten work done, but it would have cost us $20,000 to $30,000, and this was 10 or 15 years ago. Who knows what it would cost now? Because we have all plaster walls, and so there would have been all of these ceilings and all of these walls that would have had to been shored up. So the short of it is we would not be eligible for this program. So there are going to be homeowners that you'll see that with, especially in the Rust Belt where there's a lot of older buildings. So with that, I'm going to move on to the questions. So this is kind of a question that I had as well. If there is a new administration, could that administration eliminate this program? And anybody can answer.
Okay, so to be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. I think in part, I think the rush of some states in doing this is to ensure that that has been allocated and that there isn't a way to then pull back those funds. But I do not know that, and I do not know if that would actually occur or not. I'd be interested if Olivia has a sense of that as well. But I mean, the funding has been allocated through. Olivia, what do you think on this one?
Ooh, I mean, this could be why we see these deadlines. Like, let us know if you're not going to take the funds and get your plans in by January, you know, just trying to move things along before things transition. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And it will be interesting to me to see if any state does say no, thank you. By next month, by August 16th.
I think that's fair, but I think we also need to figure out the answer to that.
Yes.
That will matter a great deal. And the threshold here is whether the money is committed to a particular location. And there's probably a better legal term, but I know in previous administration changes, there were lots of efforts to get money out and cross the line. So but it would be helpful to know.
Well, and I do know with the homeowners assistance fund, that was a big part of not having any clawback of those funds was the fact that they had already been allocated and distributed to the states. And that's the reason they were not included in any clawbacks on that. So I do think it is going to be an interesting question and one we definitely need to find the answer to.
Okay.
Try and hunt that down for you and get back to you.
Thank you. Okay. So no household can apply for this rebate until after the state sends in their implementation blueprint, which would be well after January 1st, 2025.
Not necessarily well after that. The plans do, as we've seen in New York, could submit early and launch quickly. So in those instances, they would then already be able to be eligible for the program, but we do need to wait for those program launches. And so it's my understanding with New York, the reason they were able to do so is that they initially expanded the program, and there may be more expansion as it goes forward. But that's why I think it is very important that if you are going to be working in this area, that you sign up for those updates so you can watch any program developments, any iterations of that, and know when those programs have launched so you can advise households accordingly.
So is it the tenant or the landlord who would qualify for the program?
Either. If the tenant applies, they will need landlord permission, but the landlord can go ahead for units in its building.
And the landlord could do it based on the tenant's income levels, but then usually that would, obviously involve tenant, either that they've already been informed of that due to the nature of the tenancy, or that then the tenant would have to actively engage in that to provide the income information for qualification purposes.
I'll just say that in terms of successful projects with, small 1 to 4 unit, it's great to have kind of the tenant engagement early on, just because that makes for a more successful project completion, to have them aware of what's going on and the benefit to them to go through the disruption in their life as they get the energy work done.
Okay, I don't know if any of the panelists can answer this. And if not, maybe there are other housing counselors from New Jersey who can answer this. But the question is, where can one get a listing of energy rebate programs and incomes needed to qualify in New Jersey? And it doesn't, go ahead, Olivia.
There are a couple of different resource tools out there, and they may or may not be as helpful. In the energy assistance world, what we in the area call the LIHEAP Clearinghouse is a sort of state-by-state listing of different places for various energy assistance programs, income qualified energy assistance programs. There's also the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center's tool, DSIRE, which is a state by state sort of listing, almost down to a utility by utility within the state listing of various energy efficiency programs or different programs. So you would have to sort of click in there and then learn about each of the programs. And just to put it out on everyone's radar screen, tools are being created for the various IRA incentive programs. The Rocky Mountain Institute has a tool, consumer facing tool, where essentially you put in your address or your zip code and say if you're a homeowner or a renter, and then it sort of helps you build a plan of what you're eligible for in your area. So things are coming online. This is a dynamic area about tools and resources. So that is something that we should check back in with the group on, with a sort of list, of links of various tools for housing counselors to have on hand.
Great, thank you. And Stacy very helpfully put the general LIHEAP link in, and then additionally put in the New Jersey LIHEAP clearinghouse information.
And I would also say with the LIHEAP clearinghouse information, it often provides state level information as well as municipality information and utility by utility information. But again, that just shows there are a number of programs out there that come from various sources, and that's why your assistance is so greatly needed.
How can a consumer determine legitimate from fraudulent solar programs? Many of my clients are getting scammed by these solar companies in New Jersey.
Well, one thing that you can do, depending upon what information is available in your states and also who's kind of scamming. I found in solar, there can be different ways that those scams can occur. It can be done through the home improvement contractors that are doing door-to-door solicitation to encourage people signing up for those programs. If it's coming through the home improvement contractors, typically the way that we have been able to identify problematic contractors can be through state licensing websites that then post the information as to whether or not there have been complaints or concerns filed against that individual or entity. And so that is one way in which to try to vet and determine if the contractor has had any history of misrepresentations or misinformation being provided. And in fact, it's always my recommendation to households before they sign up for anything that they do look up the contractor on those websites. Most of them have a license lookup, so you can check that history and try to make a determination if there are any concerns, as well as ensuring that that individual is bonded, sufficiently bonded to cover any cost or concerns with the implementation of the improvements. And then you can also see what they're actually certified to do and if they have the proper licenses for the products in which they're going to be installing. So I do think the contractor licensing boards can be a good resource for this. Other states may have, for the financing companies, depending on who the financing company is, they may actually have similar listings and disclosures. For example, in California, we do have for solar, we do have the ability for our homeowners to use the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. So our Department of Financial and Protection and Innovation actually includes a list of those programs, who are the different administrators and financing companies, and they'll also post if they've been cited, their license is revoked, which one of our program administrators' license was revoked, and they'll also put any citations out there to companies or solicitors who have been problematic in soliciting for solar. Last but not least, our contractor state licensing board has also been very active in the solar. They do publish and make known any complaints that are filed if there's been a revocation, and they even set up a solar restitution fund, though that was exhausted, I think, within the first year, because regrettably, with all of that being said, it is still very difficult to track and find these complaints of who is legitimate or not in this field. In fact, we have a recommendation and a request to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that they should expand their complaint database for this area in particular, so we could actually look and find complaints that are associated with particular solar financing companies or products. I do believe if you search that, you can find some complaints about particular products or entities. And I have to say, in looking at solar, oftentimes I just do the Google search and I find a number of financing companies that were either cited by the local AG's office, litigated against, and you can find that information. So with all of that I said, I also just Google search the companies, because oftentimes that's where I uncover complaints, citations, and other allegations against them for fraud and abuses.
I just want to add quickly that in New York State, we have a program called New York Sun that NYSERDA manages. And so that is just, they do vet some solar contractors and they actually rank them by quality. So again, in your advocacy with the state, as they're setting up these programs, you may ask them to help by doing that kind of work as well.
I also just want to flag that in the Inflation Reduction Act through the EPA, so this is a different set of programs than the Department of Energy rebate programs we've been talking about. There is $7 billion that is flowing to the Solar for All EPA program, so that there are, or maybe programs within your states targeted to perhaps households with fewer resources, however we're going to define this, that with a curated list of approved vetted contractors. So it's a more carefully designed type of program. So keep an eye out for the Solar for All types of programs in your state. They may be a beast of a different animal. But again, this money is sort of newish. So those programs may be in like early stages of development or launch.
And I also want to point out that Olivia did put some very helpful links into the chat to help you do some research on solar companies. So another question is about organizations that are like state or nonprofit that provide supported housing for persons with disabilities, ex-offenders, or recovering substance abusers. Can they participate in the energy rebate programs? What if the tenant's lease isn't in their name, but in the housing providers, which could be a state agency, nonprofit, etc.?
We haven't gotten into that space too much, but New York State's housing agency is trying to make sure that any new homes that are assisted, like these types of properties, are meet all energy standards, are all clean heat, air source heat pumps, that type of thing. And I think they are working on, financing mechanisms, I believe, through I don't even Rewiring America may have money to help retrofits for affordable housing developments. I know that CPC does, Community Preservation Corporation. So I think those are the types of programs that are out there.
I just want to point out that there's a question from Linda Sapp in the chat that the panelists can go ahead and feel free to answer on their own. It's kind of a specific question for all of you. So what are there any resources for the home repair programs that you can share? I would imagine that's at the state level. It would have to be.
Yeah, so what we're using, is state funds, but we're also trying to partner up with the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is a Department of Energy program that's funneled through our state housing agency. And then a lot of communities still have home funds that they get access to. So it's kind of the conventional, typical mix of different home repair programs. We're trying to get smarter about rural development programs to help with repairs as well.
And I can't help it. There's still some states with HAF programs open, and some of those HAF programs that are open have critical home repair programs that are going on right now. And so that may be a limited pool of funds that is still available for critical home repairs. I will go ahead and put into the chat the map of the states that are still currently open with home repair programs. It includes links to their state websites. You would have to click through to see if that state has a home repair program. But I do know a number of states that remain open have that as a resource available. And so I will put that in the chat for all of you.
Great, thank you. If a consumer is told about programs in a state that's not implemented them yet, what's the best way to protect them in a time and cost sense without letting wrinkles in the process prevent them from assistance.
Well, one of the things that I think would be important at this point in time that could already be done before the programs launch is a lot of this looking at what are currently the programs that are available and what would they be eligible for? What are those improvements? What is it that needs to be done to the home in order to implement those improvements? So they can go ahead and start looking at that strategy or looking at where there are gaps within those programs in which they may need assistance once the rebate program is announced and launched. Not only could this be helpful to that individual consumer, but I also think it could be helpful to the organization to start to see where those gaps are, where the needs are for the community members, and maybe advocate for that inclusion within the programs. And then, with this iterative program design, I think that can be an ongoing thing that's done as well as that as you are watching households come in with needs, helping to track and monitor that and provide that as feedback to the state programs may increase or expand the programs they would be willing to consider.
Here's an interesting question, and this kind of, I think, came up probably from Susan, you talking about not going from natural gas to electric. Is there an option to go from oil to natural gas in this program?
What's interesting in New York State is that they've determined that it is cost effective to move from delivered fuels, so that's propane, oil, even electric resistance heat, to air source heat pumps. So that is something they will incentivize because the consumer will save money if they transition from delivered fuels to a heat pump. So right now in New York State, there is no incentive to switch from oil to natural gas. That's not the preferred transition. Doesn't get us quite far enough in the clean energy transition.
And Olivia or Stacy, do you know if this is an option that a state can choose?
The appliance rebates are for electrification, so not
Oh, no.
there.
Okay.
But I'm trying to think, I'm not, the home energy efficiency rebate is looking at the percentage of savings. So and I know that you've got to use Energy Star products. So like would a gas fired HVAC unit count? I would have to look into that. I don't know the answer.
Okay, let's see. I think that is all the questions.
Well, I'm
So,
just going to jump in. Let me
go
just
ahead.
jump in. So somebody's pointed out, who was it? Can't quite see. While the IRA home energy rebates don't cover solar, the wiring rebates and panel work refund can be used as part of a larger solar project. I mean, I think it's in our general interest if we can get people on solar, if that works for them, to be the goal rather than just having people keep their fossil fuel based source. Now, obviously it has to work for the family, it has to work for the house, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, that kind of navigation of the multiple resources is kind of the ideal situation we're working on. And apparently there's a toolkit underway from NeighborWorks, and the PETA is reporting. And oh yeah, Olivia put in about the IRA home energy rebates. So thank you, Olivia.
The tax credits for solar right now are most generous, right, at 30%. And so again, the beauty of these programs is that there's something for everybody of any income. And so if you are working with a more moderate income family that's got the tax appetite, solar is a great way to offset the increased electric use of installing a heat pump. So you'll want to know about all these ways to package up the incentives, and each individual consumer is going to be slightly different in terms of what part of the program makes the most sense for them.
So it's going to require a kind of a very much a toolkit and a technically smart approach. I know there have been talk about, well, it's great to have tax incentives, but that doesn't work for lower income people. How did that end up in the legislation? Do we know whether there was a way for lower income people just to get a straight grant to do solar?
That may be the $7 billion Solar for All EPA program.
So we'll do a whole session on this, and we touched on this a tiny bit with the Habitat for Humanity presentation, but we'll do a lot more work on this. It's an area that
There's
has a lot.
another player too, in
Oh,
addition,
yeah?
and that could be at your state utility commission. There may be open dockets for utility ratepayer funded types of programs. And so this could be part of that mix. I'm just saying that you may all of a sudden, it may not be there today, but maybe months from now or next year, programs could get added that target certain populations for solar, heavily subsidized solar products. It's just subsidized a different way.
And somebody is asking, how do you get solar credits for the various products?
As a developer or as a household, the individual household would be applying to, in their taxes, they'd be filling out a form for their 30%
For their tax return.
In their tax return for the 30% of the, all the costs. There are incentives also for developers to be targeting and sorry, Susan, disadvantaged communities. These are like federal terms. I've got, there's an enhanced incentive for them. So we may be seeing a lot more activity of these rooftop solar companies targeting low-income households, because for them, they can get other federal dollars as part of their sort of business plan. So it's just good to know what's going on in that landscape. It may explain certain players and their motivations.
Good.
Okay,
Ellie,
that is the last question. I just one more thing that I want to say to everybody. There's been a lot of questions about the recording and about the links. If you're on our listserv, you will get the recording with all of the links that were mentioned today via email through our listserv. If you want to see the recording and you're not on our listserv, you can go to our website at hsgcenter.org/video. By Monday afternoon, evening, it should be there and available to watch. And if you are not on our listserv, well, you should sign up to be on our listserv so you can get this information easily.
Exactly. So let's close out the call. One couple quick things to fill people in on. So one is be on the listserv if you're at all attached to a housing counseling agency. The other is that your organization should join NHRC. We have a sliding scale based on organizational size or the size of your housing counseling program. We mentioned them in the beginning, Ellie went through them, but there's deep discounts available. The most valuable, I think, is the credit report one, which is quite substantial. This is Core Credit, it's CoreLogic. They are the largest consolidator of credit reports. They have a long history of being very reliable. And they are doing, and what we're talking about is a tri-merged soft pull with 3 credit scores, and you can get cheaper. You could choose to only get 2 credit reports, or do just one if that fits into your model more effectively. But the point is that it's a way of substantially reducing your overhead costs. The other discounts are good and helpful for some organizations, but the real thing is you're supporting our work, our ability to lobby in Congress, to lobby with the administration, to roll out programs like this and to push for not only housing counseling, but for affordable housing in general. One of the great things that we do is we put out the many sign-on letters, and so you heard about a couple of them from our friends at the National Consumer Law Center. We will continue doing that role. Some of them are ones that we originate. A lot of them are ones that are done by other organizations that fit in neatly with our work. We do vet them ahead of time, and I think it well represents the values that the work that many of us do. Joining NHRC allows us to do this work, and it keeps us going. It's the more organizations that join, the stronger we will be. So please consider that. The link is on our website, and I'm sure it circulates pretty regularly on our list as well. Please consider doing that. We have quite a lineup for the next few couple of months, but there will also be we're going to add some more. Oh, there's the lineup right there, popping out of nowhere. And Ellie walked through them. I'm not going to go through them, especially. I'll just say that NAR settlement, the reason we're doing that particular one, I know that at our conference we had probably the first deep dive into the settlement because it was pretty fresh, and we were with the realtors and we had a good discussion around it. There's been a lot of discussion about it. The reason we're doing it again or doing it later is the idea that we will be covering more of what actually is happening now with the dust is beginning to settle. And we may know more from the Department of Justice, what they're going to do, which could overturn the whole apple cart or leave things as they are. We just don't know. But we'll hopefully have more up-to-date information on that. Ellie put in about the VASP and the FHA supplemental option. So these are loss mitigation tools. They're really valuable. They are what will help stop people from losing their house, essentially, because interest rates have gone up. They will not have the penalty of having to lose their entire lower interest rate. They'll end up with a partial handling of the problem, and hopefully reduce the costs and keep it much more the affordability range. So, kudos to FHA and VA, and I know that NCLC did an awful lot of work to get us to this point. There was FHA came around, VA took a really long time, but it's the effectiveness of these groups has been really helpful. Money habitudes we already touched on. It's a way of kind of understanding people's motivations and that how they make decisions around financial issues. We'll also have the state of the Hispanic homeownership report. These are really excellent. We've done these in previous years. It's a report that's done by NAREP, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. This isn't just a general flyover. There's lots of high value in what they do, and I think it'll be interesting given the importance of the Hispanic market. We'll do some more things on solar coming up, and we will have other events in our lineup that will help you stay on top of the cutting edge of things. So with that note, I think it's time to close up the call. Thank you, everybody, and great participation.